Welcome everybody to this special event that's part of the Chair in Transgender Studies Visiting Speaker Series, and we're glad that folks online and here in the room can join us. I'm Aaron DeVore, and I'm the founder of the Chair in Transgender Studies, the Transgender Archives, and the Moving Trans History Forward conferences. So we always start at UVic with a territorial acknowledgement, so I'd like to do that now. We acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, that's the Songhees and Esquimalt people on whose territory the University of Victoria stands, and the Lekwungen and Wasanich peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. So before I introduce our speaker, I would like to just take a minute to review what the Chair in Transgender Studies does, what we're about. But for the folks who haven't heard it before, we are the world's first and only Chair in Transgender Studies, and we work to provide inspiration and hope for transgender people and our allies everywhere around the world. We contribute to the development and communication of accurate, research-based, real-world knowledge about trans plus people so that we can use it to build a better world with better policies and laws and to drive social change. We also help to build strong and resilient social and cultural communities and individual well-being through facilitating, sponsoring arts and cultural and social activities. And in all that we do, we're committed to applying an intersectional lens in our work to advance reconciliation, racial justice, equity, and inclusion for all. And so our speaker is Luca Tainio, who is a doctoral researcher at the University of Helsinki in Finland and an adjunct lecturer at Karlstad University in Sweden. His research focuses on questions of transmasculinity, embodiment, and knowledge production. And currently, Luca is also part of two research projects. One is Effective Activism, Sites of Queer and Trans World Making, and the other is Transcreative, with an asterisk, Health, Violence, and Environment in Transcultural Production. So the title of Luca's talk is, I'm So Proud, I Grew It Myself, Challenging Cisnormative Ideals of the Penis. So please join me in welcoming Luca Tainio.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and also thank you for welcoming me here for my almost brief visit at your university. And also thank you for organizing, all of you who are here present, for organizing such a lovely conference as the Moving Trans History Forward one was. I have really enjoyed both my stay here and also being able to participate in the conference in person. And for me, it was, of course, really interesting to hear these kind of discussions and keynotes and panels that were coming from this specific geopolitical and cultural context, as my background is completely different. Mostly in connection to what is happening in the US, because I mean, being here, we are so much more closer than being in Sweden or Finland, which unfortunately doesn't mean that we haven't been affected by all that is going on. So thank you. And maybe one thing to add to my introduction. As said, I am doing my PhD at the University of Helsinki, which is in Finland, and part-time working in Karlstad University, which is in Sweden. So I am a Finn, but I'm mostly living in Sweden. So if anyone is interested in hearing a bit more about trans studies in the Nordic context, please feel free to ask, and I will do my best to answer. But to my presentation today. The seminar presentation is based on an already published article, which in turn will be part of my overall PhD project, which is an article-based dissertation, including all in all 3 articles and a fairly broad introduction. As a side note, the title of my presentation is actually a quote from one of the vlogs I discuss in the article. The whole sentence is as follows. I'm so proud, I grew it myself, I watered it, and I fed it, and now it's just a full-grown dick. Wanted to mention this because in the poster it kind of looks like I'm talking about myself. I wasn't, it was a quote. Maybe first a couple of words on how I ended up doing this research or talking and writing about this specific topic, which are maybe more, or at least partly personal and also partly academic. As a trans scholar, and as many trans scholars, I am too personally invested in my research topic, and also as a trans man, like many trans men, I do have my moments of embodied gender trouble or dysphoria, as it is often called. So my thinking here came from basically wanting to challenge a couple of things or ideas or discourses. Firstly, the often repeated, although usually well-meaning and trans-inclusive rhetoric of trans men are men, even though they do not have penises. Of course, as such, this is true, and I'm not arguing against it. One does not have to have a penis to be a man, and also having a penis doesn't necessarily make one automatically a man. However, this type of rhetoric ignores some specific forms of transmasculine or transmale embodiment, and more importantly, it leaves the category of the penis and what counts as a penis intact. And secondly, when trans penises are addressed or written about or talked about, what is usually, I would say almost always actually meant are either surgically altered trans penises or prosthetic ones, or more recently transplants. So my aim here then is to both include these specific kinds of bodily realities in the discussion, as well as to bother the cultural understandings or ideas or ideals of what a penis is or should be. Both of these, of course, also mean broadening the overall understanding of what a male body is and what it looks like. Maybe a tiny side note here, if not everybody is familiar with the topic or kind of the surgical side of transitioning, genital surgery for trans men, to put it really simplistically, basically means either acquiring a penis that is the same shape and same size as a average normative cis penis, which would be phalloplasty, or acquiring a penis that is same shape but smaller in size, which is methodoplasty. In either case, the cis penis problematically forms the norm, creating the framework for not only the actual object or the body part, but also the ideal and the understanding of what counts as a penis. What I am talking about is trans penises outside of these, the kind grown from testosterone use, the grew it myself kind. And here, second side note, if people are not familiar with the effects of hormone replacement therapy, one of the changes while using testosterone is that the body part that would be on a cis woman's body be called clitoris grows. And this is what I'm referring to when I talk about trans penises. So my interest here lies in this sort of crossroad between considering trans men's embodiment and what is usually excluded when discussing them, and also the concrete material penis as a body part that, as far as I can see, has been left quite unbothered or critically unexamined within feminist scholarship, but also in wider social sciences. As a topic, it is usually being kind of allocated to the realm of medicine or medical sciences. Of course, within feminist scholarship, there has been a lot that has been written on on phallus, but I would say that that's a tiny bit of a different thing than a penis as like a concrete body part, which is what I'm interested in. And as such, the penis still remains or persists as the above all marker of masculinity and maleness. Or on the flip side, the lack of a cisnormative penis marks non-male embodiment. So I have a couple of quotes and I put them on the slide so it's maybe easier for you to follow. So back to the idea of penis as a marker of male embodiment, and also the lack of cisnormative penis as a marker of non-male embodiment. As Gail Keegan and Tobias Raun, for example, have mentioned, and I'm quoting, trans men are typically thought of and depicted as deficient, castrated, and having not enough genitals, assumed to lack a genital status reserved for cisgender men alone, and can therefore never be real men. Even if genital surgery has been pursued, trans men's genitals are typically demonized as monstrous, insensate, or mutilated. End of quote. So what I'm arguing here is that this seemingly simple division into men who have penises, cis, and men who do not, at least without surgery, trans, is both materially more muddled and complex than usually considered, and to a great extent discursively created and maintained. Furthermore, it does not reflect the lived, experienced, and embodied realities of many trans men. To give an example of this kind of distinction making, I am referring to how penis length in general is commonly discussed. According to BGU International, which is one of the leading urology journals, the average length of a normative cis penis is 9.16 centimeters flaccid and 13.12 centimeters erect. A cis penis smaller than 7 centimeters is medically considered a micropenis, which I consider also quite a problematic distinction to make, but that kind of falls outside the scope of this paper. According to endocrinologists Tinkonen and Das, through hormone replacement therapy, the trans penis grows on average around 4 to 7 centimeters. So my point here is that this of course means that there is an overlap between cis penises and trans penises, and in fact some trans penises are bigger or at least longer than some cis penises. However, this is actually never explicitly mentioned. Another point to make here is the difference in ways of marking the penis size. For cis penises, two measurements are commonly given, as you just heard, flaccid and erect. In some occasions, 4 numbers are given if also including girth. But for trans penises, only one approximate number is usually mentioned. And this despite the fact that in this sense, trans penises function in the exact same way as cis penises. When they get erect, they stiffen and grow in length and girth. As noted by anthropologist and sociologist Evelyn Callahan and David Griffiths, among many others, the medical imagination, while holding an immense amount of power, especially when talking about trans bodies and trans people, is less than inclusive. Urologists, as they note, quoting, have a restrictive view of what a penis is or should be, what a penis looks like or should look like, and what a penis does or should be able to do. In connection to my material, to which I will get in a second, the ability to have penetrative sex with a surgically non-altered trans penis is one of those things that the medical imagination fails to acknowledge or ignores on purpose or actively denies, even though that goes against the embodied experiences of many trans men. To further cite Callahan and Griffiths, While medical texts emphasize the analogous physical nature of the clitoris and the penis, as well as the fact that they develop from the same tissue, medical professionals consider it important to maintain a distinction. So basically what I'm doing here is instead of understanding trans men's embodiment through this lack and deficiency, to go back to Keegan and Ron, I am through my material creating a counter-narrative, or different way of seeing and understanding trans male bodies. For that, I am using the concept of body-reflexive practices of masculinity, which was initially formulated by masculinity scholar Raven Connell, and later utilized within the context of transmasculinity specifically by Sofia Boehm and Pedro Vasconcelos. With the concept, Connell initially aimed to make explicit the ways in which masculinity is constructed through bodily practices and experiences, and happens as a mutual two-way movement between the society and the individual. Quoting here, societal influences shape bodily practice and gender identification, but individuals also shape gender practice by relating their own bodily experiences to the social influences, as formulated by Boehm and Vasconcelos. And now, finally, we get to my material. So for this article, I used 3 YouTube video logs or vlogs by 2 trans men and 1 trans masculine person, and I'm referring to trans men in my text or in my talk for simplicity reasons basically, but I just want to acknowledge that this is not how all of the vloggers actually identify. And all of the vlogs specifically address the topic of possibility of having penetrative sex with surgically unmodified trans penises. So these are kind of like how-to posts, or follow maybe the form of kind of sex advice blogs. And all of the bloggers have posted quite extensively on different topics connected to transitioning also previously. And on the slide, you can see all the bloggers and also the titles of the blogs. And I kind of came across this material kind of accidentally, to say. I stumbled upon one of the vlogs and I found it interesting, and then I started looking for more vlogs on the same topic, and I could actually only find 3. I found 4 all in all, actually, but one of the bloggers just kind of like didn't really stay on topic, but kind of veered into completely different subjects, so I had to leave that one out of my material. Even though the vlogs are in essence visual material, I started out by transcribing them all into a text format and approached them through critical discourse analysis. I'm understanding here discourses simplistically as fixed ways of thinking or talking about a certain topic or subject, formed through repetition and variation. Thinking or talking about certain topic is, of course, never separate from social reality, which is why I'm following sociolinguist Norman Fairclough's formulation of discourses as part of social structure and practices, and also linking to philosopher Michel Foucault's thinking on discursive power, which is restrictive but also creative. In general, I did not or do not consider materiality and discourses as 2 separate things, but see them as interlinked and connected. Discourses always describe social, cultural, and embodied reality as well as build it, and according to Fairclough, all texts create social change. They construct social identities, social relations, and systems of knowledge and belief. Going back to the roots of trans studies and following Sandy Stone's thinking on trans bodies as genres and sites of culturally and medically inscribed meanings, I understand discourses here as technologies of constructing our being and articulating embodied possibilities. And as previously mentioned, I came across the material kind of by accident, but I felt that this also really nicely spoke to trans and cultural studies scholar Tobias Raun's work, and Raun has, as probably many of you know, written quite extensively on specifically YouTube vlogs and trans masculinity. And of course, transition-related vlogs are an essential part of trans culture and could be considered the first form of mass cultural production by trans people, to cite media scholar Laura Horak here. And as mentioned in the beginning, one of the research projects that I am in at the moment is focused on trans culture and trans cultural production, so it was kind of also fitting in that sense. According to Raun, transition-related vlogging has formed a genre of its own, a living archive of trans corporeality and identity. What is relevant for my What is relevant for my material is the way in which the vlogs, in addition to functioning as places of peer support, documenting and sharing information and advice, they have become sites of visualizing and defining the ideal transmasculine body. Citing Ron again, vlogs not only form an archive of how trans male bodies could look, but also their cumulative effects play an increasingly significant role in determining how they should look. What is significant here is the intense focus placed on specifically the upper body, which becomes the privileged side of self-fashioning, and as Ron continues, a fetishized marker of maleness in the trans male vlogs. The chest is invested with sexual potency and desire. This, I think, stands in an interesting and kind of curious opposition to the notion of the lower body, the penis, being the center of sexual potency on a cisgender male body. So I found it interesting to, in a way, enter into a conversational discussion with Tobias Raun's work by bringing in the considerations on the significance or importance of the lower body. When I started out looking at the blogs, I identified 5 repeating themes running through all of the blogs, which you can see on the slide. Initially, they were vocabulary connected to the penis, practical instructions and tips, notes on possible partners' bodies, significance of the lower body to self, and vulnerability or dysphoria. For the purpose of the article and also because of the given word limit, I selected 2 main discourses, being the ways in which the vloggers talk about trans penises, their function and use, and how they name penises, and secondly, the vloggers' own affective experiences connected to the topic. So I basically merged some of the themes together under these 2 wider ones and left some things out of this paper because they were kind of outside of the scope. So I will say a few words and give a few examples from the vlogs on how trans penises are named, and kind of few points about the language around that, as well as a few examples of the affective, what I'm calling here affective experiences. So the kind of more notes on the vlogger's own feelings and experiences connected to their on bodies as well. And then, as I think this is a third side note, the article was published on a specific theme issue, which was called Transforming Genitals in Culture and Media, in Northern Lights, which is a film and media publication. So I actually left some of the kind of more trans study specific points out of the article, which I had included in the original draft for this text. And one of those things that I left out was observations or points I made about trans joy and gender euphoria. And I'm at the moment actually translating and revising this article for a Finnish trans studies handbook. And now I'm kind of putting the trans joy and gender euphoria back into the text because I think that's quite relevant and important, maybe specifically at this point in time, going back to maybe mentioning your neighbor country. So I will include that also in my slides here. I'm starting to see the point of the clicker. So a few points about naming the penis or talking about the penis and the ways in which the vloggers talk about the topic. They all mostly use such terms as dick, cock, or growth, with alternatives such as junk, peen, or downstairs also mentioned. So these kind of like colloquial words predominantly. The word penis is also used, but less often, which might reflect what trans linguist Lal Zeman has described as an unwillingness to dismiss scientific and medical authority altogether, possibly making the trans men feel that claiming penis rather than dick is a riskier assertion open for challenge from those authoritative sources. So coming back here to the more restrictive power of the medical discourse, I would argue that the same type of falling back to these authoritative sources is visible in moments when the bloggers feel like it is important and needed to be as clear as possible about the body parts they are actually referring to. Which you can see also examples on the slide here. And even if they themselves do not actually agree with this cisnormative discourse, they seem to feel like using the wording of the medical discourse is the right, or at least the most commonly understood, way of referring to trans penises without causing any confusion. This might also arise from the common understanding of trans penises being those which have been surgically modified or in some case prosthetic. However, thinking through Foucault, one could see traces of discursive power here, placing these trans men in a specific position with regards to claiming male embodiment. Out of all of the terms used by the vloggers, growth is most commonly used for specifically trans penises, but as Kate Cooks makes clear here in the last quote, it can also refer to a cis penis. Cook says, honestly, a lot of these tips can also be used if you're a cis guy and you don't have a lot of growth going on downstairs. After all penises grow to their adult measurements, and those measurements are always different between individuals. Even so, the anxieties surrounding penis size have been well documented in both popular and scientific literature on male bodies, which usually means cis male bodies. Arguably, this has more to do with the cultural understanding of the penis as a symbol of masculinity and power, rather than the actual corporealities of men. In this, the vlogs are not an exception. All of the vloggers give an estimation of an average trans penis size, but contextualize the overall discussion as addressing sex with any small penises without making a distinction between cis and trans. This is also more of a general tendency throughout the vlogs to emphasize that all bodies, regardless if they're cisgender or transgender, are different and function differently and fit together differently. I feel like I'm running through this, but finally I will give you a couple of examples of the kind of more effective engagements to the topic from the vloggers. And examples of the ways in which the vloggers address their own experiences or feelings connected to being able to use their own bodies for certain sexual purposes and possibilities, and what I would see as instances of trans joy, or maybe even more so gender euphoria. I think this is reflected in the use of words such as amazing, empowering, and life-changing, as you can see on the quotes. Even though the actual advice or guidance part of the vlogs are quite matter-of-factly, which is, I guess, befitting of this genre of sex advice vlogs. All of the vloggers also address their own feelings and effective engagements with the topic, where they switch into a kind of a different register of talking. The vloggers themselves do not explicitly refer to masculinity as such, but in the context of men whose masculinity is often open to questioning or invalidation from the cisnormative society, I would read their expressions of empowerment in connection to their masculinity, their masculine sense of self, and the embodied possibilities in sex as part of their construction of masculinity. This, in addition to the mostly positive remarks on the size of their penises, is remarkable in the sense that the connection between satisfaction with one's penis size and overall self-image has been noted in several articles on cis men, even noting a correlation between satisfaction with one's penis size and one's face, two features that are seemingly completely unrelated to each other. There is a reason to assume this is also true for trans men, and satisfaction with one's own body translates into being more comfortable in one's masculinity or maleness. The last point. And in the context of trans masculinity specifically, this is not merely a question of maleness or masculinity, but also connects to questions of gender dysphoria, or rather lack thereof. Dysphoria in itself is not the main topic in any of the vlogs, but the possibility of dysphoria, or the existence of dysphoria, mostly I would say in connection to the possible dysphoria caused for the listeners or watchers rather than their own experiences, is acknowledged briefly by the vloggers in different moments of the vlogs, often also by referring to the sensitivity of the topic or the sensitive nature of discussing this topic. And I think this maybe also kind of refers back to both the penis being cisnormative, penis being the kind of ultimate marker of maleness, and also the idea of trans men's embodiment as lacking or deficiency. So I think that's kind of like where the sensitivity in a sense comes from. Two things I consider noteworthy here are, firstly, that the positive feelings or expressions of positive feelings and yeah, this kind of like reassuring, I would maybe say, words are a lot more present or a lot more dominant in all of the vlogs than any mentions of any negative experiences or feelings. And secondly, dysphoria here is most often connected to language more than actual bodies. So it is the kind of cisnormative misnaming or misrecognition of trans bodies that causes possible dysphoria, not the material bodily configurations themselves. Also, as you can see in the quote, the second from the top, Ross actually makes the connection between possible dysphoria and using a prosthetic, with the possibility which the possibility of using one's own body can then alleviate. So here again, dysphoria is not actually caused by the body, but actually rather cured by the body and its possibilities. Out of all the vloggers, Asher is the only one who addresses the effects of dysphoria for his sexuality. That's the third from the top. And as you can see, even though he goes into a kind of acknowledgement of difficulties or negative feelings and the problems that dysphoria can create, he also still goes kind of back into a more positive register in the end of this quote, and also the meaning of not only using his body but also talking about it and making this vlog. To briefly conclude, as mentioned earlier, I don't see discursive and material as separate or exclusive. As Aboim and Vasconcelos also point out, quoting, bodily reflexive practices incorporate both the individual and their context, both material and discursive dimensions of bodies. In this sense, one of the most telling quotes comes from Cooks, who refers to the concreteness and hapticity of his penis, which is the last quote on the slide, where he talks about grabbing. Following this, I would argue that both the bodily possibilities and, as demonstrated by Kate Cooks, the concrete hapticity of the trans penis and the act of discussing it in these vlogs constitute a form of bodily reflexive practice of masculinity. Thus, the discursive and embodied existence of the trans penis is a part of creating masculinity instead of marking a lack or deficiency despite which it is possible to claim maleness. And in the vlogs, I would argue this is also connected to joy and gender euphoria. And the last slide is works I have mentioned during this talk. Thank you.
So I thank everybody for attending. I would like to just remind you that we do all kinds of programming throughout the year. I encourage you, if you're not already on our mailing list, to be on our mailing list or our social media. And so if you enjoy what we do, I have to point out to you that contrary to what many people think, the chair in transgender studies is not an endowed chair, and our survival depends on donations from people of goodwill here at UVic, out in the world at large, and from, of course, the support from UVic in giving us space and time and places to do what we do. I thank everybody who has attended, both online and in person, and most of all, I thank Luca Tainio for a really interesting talk.